ever get that feeling, like you've totally misread someone?
Oh, absolutely.
Like your internal radar was just completely off?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're diving into today with Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers.
Ooh, good one.
We're going beyond the typical book report stuff, though.
Right.
Get ready for some serious aha moments.
I like it.
About why we so often misjudge people.
Yeah, and Gladwell doesn't just throw out theories,
Right.
He digs into real-life stories, spies, scandals, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, I love that.
To show how these psychological quirks actually play out.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff.
It's a little unsettling, too.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so before we even get into the heavy stuff,
Okay.
picture this, all right?
All right.
You're at a fancy hotel with your parents,
Good.
but your dad's totally out of his element. Imagine him surrounded by, velvet ropes and chandeliers, more interested in, math and gardening and the Bible.
I can see it.
And this isn't just a random scenario. This is straight from Gladwell's own life.
Really?
It's his dad.
Wow.
And it perfectly illustrates how we do this thing
What's that?
where we categorize people
Okay.
based on, the tiniest bit of information,
Totally.
often without even realizing we're doing it.
It's true.
And so we create these whole narratives in our heads. And here's the kicker. Gladwell argues we're kind of hardwired to believe those narratives.
Okay.
To just assume people are being truthful.
Interesting.
It's this thing called the default to truth.
Default to truth. Got it.
And it's usually, a good thing.
I could see that.
Can you imagine if we questioned everyone's motives all the time?
Oh, exhausting.
You would never get anything done.
Exactly.
But that default to truth,
Yeah.
it also makes us incredibly vulnerable
Oh, yeah.
to those who, they might have some hidden agendas.
Right.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
Gladwell, he talks about Anna Montes,
Okay.
this high-ranking U.S. intelligence analyst.
Who was secretly spying for Cuba
What?
for decades.
No way.
And people, they didn't suspect a thing.
Ow.
They even explained away these red flags
Really?
because, she was one of them.
Wow, that's really something.
Right.
Yeah.
It really highlights the power of this default to truth idea.
It really does.
So we've kind of established that we're terrible mind readers.
It seems that way.
But Gladwell, he takes it a step further with this concept called coupling.
Coupling. All right.
Basically, it means our actions are often tied to specific situations, not some, fixed personality trait.
Interesting.
Have you ever noticed how people, they act so differently
Yeah.
depending on, I don't know, where they are
Sure.
or who they're with?
All the time, right?
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
We might be, outgoing at a party,
Right.
but then super reserved in a business meeting.
Makes sense.
Gladwell, he challenges us to ditch this idea
What's that?
that people are just always a certain way.
Yeah. No matter the context.
Right, it's not that simple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like saying someone's always angry
Right.
just because you saw them yell at a barista.
Exactly.
You have no idea what kind of day they've had.
No idea.
To illustrate this, Gladwell talks about the Kamba people of Bolivia.
Okay.
They have these, ritualized drinking sessions
Interesting.
that surprisingly rarely end in violence.
Really?
Yeah, it totally contradicts that common Western association.
Right, with alcohol and aggression?
Exactly.
That's
So
wild.
they have these, big drinking parties.
Yeah.
And everyone's just chill.
It seems that way, yeah.
How is that even possible?
Well, it's all about the environment they create.
Okay.
Think music, structured toasts,
Mm-hmm.
a whole ritual built around it.
Interesting.
It's a world away from, a chaotic fraternity party
Oh, yeah.
where things can quickly get out of hand.
Totally.
See what I mean?
So the Kamba, they deliberately shape the context of their drinking
Mm-hmm.
to avoid those negative outcomes.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It is.
How much power our surroundings have over our behavior.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Gladwell, he actually compares alcohol to, myopia.
Myopia.
Yeah, meaning it narrows our focus
Oh,
to just the immediate environment.
Makes sense.
And the Kamba, they get this.
Yeah.
They use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
They're not fighting the effects of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
They're working with them,
Huh.
which is a really interesting way to think about it, right?
Okay, so we're starting to see how much context matters.
Right.
But what about those times
Yeah.
when we do try to judge someone
Mm-hmm.
based solely on their appearance or their demeanor?
Oh, I see.
Can we really determine someone's character
That's the question.
just by looking at them?
$1 million question.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where Gladwell's exploration of transparency comes in.
Transparency. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
He dissects this whole idea that our faces are like open books,
Right, right.
broadcasting our true emotions.
Yeah, like the eyes are the window to the soul and all that.
Exactly. It sounds good in a poem, but like, does it actually hold up?
Well, not really, no.
No.
No. Research actually shows
What's that?
that people are terrible at reading surprise in real time.
Really?
Yeah. We tend to impose our own expectations
Oh, interesting.
based on our cultural background.
Right, right.
And even within the same culture,
Yeah,
facial expressions,
yeah.
they can vary wildly from person to person.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's like,
What's that?
you know when you watch like a sitcom, like
Yeah.
Friends,
Right, sure.
Gladwell, he points out that those actors' facial expressions, they're like super exaggerated, almost cartoonish at times.
Totally.
It's true.
Yeah. And that's because, well,
Yeah.
they're playing to the camera,
Right.
making sure those emotions land, even without dialogue.
Yes.
Real life.
Still a lot messier. A lot messier.
Yeah.
So we're not as good at reading people as we think we are.
Not even close.
Really?
In fact,
Yeah.
Gladwell points out that algorithms,
Yeah.
they often outperform human judges.
Right.
Yeah. In predicting things like recidivism rates.
Wow.
And we put so much faith in our ability to see through people.
Yeah.
But the reality is we often get it wrong.
Wow. That's kind of a blow to the ego.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. We all like to think we're good judges of character, you know?
Of course, it's a humbling realization.
It is.
But it's an important one because this overconfidence in our ability to judge strangers,
yeah.
it can have some serious consequences.
Right, right.
And one of the most powerful examples Gladwell uses to illustrate this
Okay.
is the tragic case of Sandra Bland.
Oh, yeah. So we left off talking about how our inability to like accurately read strangers can have these like devastating consequences.
Yeah.
And Gladwell, he uses Sandra Bland's tragic story
To really hammer this home.
It's a powerful example.
It is.
For those who might not be familiar, could you give us a little context?
Absolutely. So in 2015, Sandra Bland, she was pulled over in Texas
Okay.
for a minor traffic violation, a failure to signal a lane change.
Right.
And the encounter had escalated into this whole confrontation.
Wow.
She was arrested.
Yeah.
And tragically, she died in jail a few days later.
Such a sad story.
It's a story that shook so many people.
Yeah.
And Gladwell, he uses it
Okay.
to illustrate just how much damage can be done when suspicion and bias, they color our interactions. Instead of assuming the best, there's this assumption that people are hiding something that they need to be scrutinized.
And we've kind of seen this, right?
Yeah.
With the default to truth concept.
Exactly.
Once we form a belief about someone, we tend to interpret everything through that lens. Totally.
Even if it means ignoring evidence to the contrary.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question.
Okay, shoot.
If this default to truth can be so risky, why is it our natural inclination?
Well, Gladwell argues it's actually essential.
Really?
For a functional society.
Okay.
Imagine, constantly questioning everyone's motives.
Right.
It'd be exhausting.
Oh my gosh, totally.
Right.
Yeah, it would create such a climate of paranoia.
Exactly.
I mean, I love a good mystery novel.
Sure.
But living in a constant state of suspicion wouldn't exactly be fun.
No, not at all.
So how do we, strike a balance then?
That's the question.
Yeah. How do we know when to trust our gut?
Right.
And when to be a bit more skeptical?
Yeah, especially with strangers.
Right, exactly.
It's tricky.
It is tricky.
Gladwell, he highlights these situations where that default to truth is most likely to backfire.
Okay, like what?
Especially those involving high-pressure situations, tense emotions, or interactions with people who might have something to gain by deceiving us.
So high-stakes business deals, emotionally charged arguments, that kind of thing?
Precisely.
Okay.
He suggests that in those situations, we need to be more willing to question our assumptions and consider different explanations for people's behavior.
So it's about, consciously shifting from a place of blind trust to one of informed skepticism.
I like that, yeah.
Don't automatically assume the worst.
Right.
but also don't check your common sense at the door.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is where Gladwell's concept of coupling becomes even more critical.
Okay.
It reminds us to consider the situation,
right,
the context of someone's behavior before we go making judgments about their character.
It reminds me of Gladwell's example of Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton.
Oh, right, yeah. Both poets who tragically died by suicide.
Yeah, it's a powerful example.
It is.
Of coupling in action.
Yeah.
Both women, they were deeply troubled.
Right.
And contemplating suicide.
Yeah.
But their methods and their ultimate fates, they were significantly influenced by factors beyond their control.
It's almost like a chilling coincidence.
It is.
But it speaks to this, larger point.
What's that?
That circumstances, they can play a huge role.
They really can.
In shaping our choices, actions,
It's true.
Even in, the most extreme situations.
It's true.
Gladwell, he highlights how Plath, in the 1960s, she used sleeping pills.
Right.
Which at the time, notoriously unreliable for a lethal dose.
Right.
Years later, Sexton.
Yeah.
She chose carbon monoxide poisoning and the kicker.
What's that?
Catalytic converters.
Okay.
Which dramatically reduce carbon monoxide emissions.
They were introduced just a year after Sexton's death.
Wow.
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
But it underscores how crucial it is to factor in those external circumstances when we're trying to make sense of someone's actions.
Especially with strangers.
Yeah, exactly.
We can't always know the why behind their behavior.
Right.
And assuming it's all down to some, internal fixed personality trait, it's often inaccurate.
Totally.
And unfair.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Default to truth, coupling, transparency.
Right.
Any other, big takeaways
What do you think?
from Gladwell's research that we should, keep in mind?
Well, he also delves into this really complex world of interrogation tactics, especially those used by the CIA in the wake of 9/11.
Okay, so we're getting into some, intense territory here.
Intense.
I remember reading about, waterboarding, sleep deprivation methods that, sparked a ton of debate.
Absolutely. And Gladwell, he doesn't shy away from those ethical complexities.
Right.
He interviews James Mitchell, one of the psychologists involved in developing the CIA's enhanced interrogation program.
I can only imagine how intense those conversations must have been.
Intense is an understatement.
Yeah.
Mitchell, he defends those techniques.
Really?
Arguing that they were necessary to get critical information from, high-level terrorists.
Right, so he's coming at it from that perspective.
Exactly.
Okay.
However, Gladwell, he brings in another perspective.
Okay, who's that?
That of Charles Morgan.
Okay, give us the rundown on Morgan.
Okay.
What's his take?
Morgan's a researcher who studied how stress impacts memory. And his work. It raises serious concerns about the accuracy of information obtained under duress.
So you're saying that people under extreme pressure might confess to things they haven't actually done.
That's exactly what Morgan's research suggests.
Wow.
He found that extreme stress, it can actually impair memory. And increase the likelihood of false confessions.
Oh, wow.
Often given just to make the pain stop.
That's terrifying.
It is, isn't it?
It completely changes how you view confessions.
Right.
Especially in these, high-stakes scenarios.
It circles back to this idea of transparency.
Right.
Or rather, the lack thereof.
Right, right.
We can't always take someone's words at face value, even under intense pressure.
It's just when you thought you had a handle on how to read people.
Exactly.
Gladwell throws another wrench in the works.
Always keeping us on our toes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what makes his work so compelling.
It really does.
He's constantly reminding us how complex human behavior really is.
Yeah.
Especially when you factor in incomplete information, mixed signals, and of course our own inherent biases.
It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle.
Right.
But half the pieces are missing.
Yeah.
And we're not even sure if we're looking at the picture.
Exactly.
The right way up.
Perfect analogy.
Right. And that's why Gladwell stresses the importance of approaching these situations with a healthy dose of humility and caution.
For sure.
We need to be more aware of how easily we misjudge others.
It's so easy to do.
It is. And question those snap judgments.
Right, which we're all prone to making.
Exactly.
Every one of us.
Yeah, so less Sherlock Holmes and his, like, deduction skills.
Right, exactly.
And more, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Mindful observation.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that our understanding of strangers, it will always be imperfect.
Right.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
It is.
Instead of trying to, like, force fit people into these neat little boxes based on our, like, limited understanding.
Limited information.
And maybe we should be more open to being surprised.
I love that.
Right.
That's where the real learning begins.
Yeah.
And the real human connection.
The human connection, that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
So we've been talking about how our, like, default settings, those ingrained tendencies to judge and interpret can really lead us astray when it comes to strangers.
Totally.
But I'm curious, like, how do these ideas play out in a larger context?
That's where Gladwell brings in some fascinating examples.
Okay.
From the world of policing, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he draws this direct line.
Okay.
From those, like, high-stakes spy cases to something as, like, seemingly ordinary as a traffic stop.
It's easy to see how things can escalate quickly when you're dealing with, like, potential criminal activity, but a routine traffic stop.
Exactly.
Tell me more about this connection.
So Gladwell, he dives into these experiments that were done in Kansas City back in the 70s.
Kansas City in the 70s.
Yeah, and they completely changed how a lot of police departments approach their work,
Okay, so what happened in Kansas City?
Well, the initial experiment, it was designed to see if increasing police patrols would actually reduce crime.
Got it.
Turns out it didn't really make a difference.
Interesting. So more police on the streets didn't necessarily translate to safer streets.
Exactly. So for the second experiment, they shifted their focus to something called proactive policing.
Proactive policing, okay.
Yeah, and this encouraged officers to be more assertive.
Okay.
Stop more cars. Basically look for any reason to intervene.
Wow.
Even for, like, minor infractions.
So it sounds like they went from, like, a reactive approach to a much more, like, proactive one.
Exactly.
But what was, like, the thinking behind that shift?
They believed that by being more visible and more assertive, they could, like, deter crime.
Yeah, okay.
Create a sense of order.
Got it.
But what ended up happening was officers were essentially looking for a needle in a haystack, you know, treating everyone like a potential suspect.
And that's where we see this, like, go beyond the ticket mentality.
Yes.
Take root.
Exactly. Instead of just, like, addressing the immediate traffic violation officers, they were trained to look for any little thing that might, you know, suggest criminal activity.
Okay.
This approach, while perhaps, like, well-intentioned, it played directly into those inherent biases we've been discussing.
It's like if you're looking for reasons to be suspicious,
exactly,
you're going to find them. Yeah. Whether they're really there or not.
It's true, and that's exactly what Gladwell argues happened.
Right.
This default to suspicion, it became so ingrained that officers started seeing ordinary behavior as suspicious.
Wow, really?
Yeah, suddenly a busted taillight.
Okay.
It wasn't just a fix-it ticket.
Right.
It was a sign of something more sinister.
Right, and it's not a huge leap to see how this mindset, combined with, like, the deeply ingrained problem of racial bias, contributed to, like, tragic outcomes.
It did.
Like Sandra Bland's case.
Absolutely.
It's heartbreaking because it speaks to this, like, larger issue of how easily our, like, preconceived notions can shape our perception and lead to these devastating misunderstandings.
It's true.
Especially in those, like, high-pressure encounters with law enforcement.
It's tough.
So what's the answer? How do we, like, move forward from this?
Yeah.
Are we just doomed to repeat these patterns?
It's a good question, and, you know, Gladwell, he doesn't offer, like, easy solutions. But he does urge us to be more aware of the power of context.
The power of context, okay.
Yeah, instead of immediately assuming the worst, he encourages us to, like, pause.
Okay.
And consider the circumstances.
Consider the circumstances, right.
Like, could this person be acting defensively because they've been unfairly targeted in the past?
Right.
Are they hesitant to speak up? because they fear being misunderstood or dismissed.
Right. It's about approaching each encounter with more empathy and understanding.
I love that.
Right. Yeah. It's like that saying, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
Right.
Be kind. Always.
It's so true.
Right.
And beyond just being kind, I think it's about being aware of our own biases.
Right.
We all have them.
We do.
Whether we realize it or not.
It's true.
And those biases, they can have a huge influence.
They really can.
On how we interact with the world around us.
So much of this comes down to, like, humility, right?
Humility.
Acknowledging that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
Our perspective isn't the only one.
Exactly.
And that sometimes the most important thing we can do is listen.
Couldn't agree more.
Right.
And, Gladwell, he makes this, really interesting point towards the end of the book.
Okay.
He says that sometimes the best conversations are the ones that allow the stranger to remain a stranger.
What do you mean by that?
He's saying that we don't always need to, solve the puzzle.
Right.
Or figure out the whole story.
Right.
Sometimes it's enough to simply acknowledge another person's humanity.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
Respect their right to be different and, appreciate the mystery that makes them unique.
That's a really beautiful way to think about it.
Isn't it?
It's not about, erasing those differences or pretending they don't exist.
Exactly.
It's about, approaching those differences with curiosity and respect.
Yes.
And a willingness to learn.
I love that. Yeah, exactly.
I agree. That's, a perfect note to end on.
It is.
So to recap our deep dive into Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers, we explored those, default settings that often trip us up.
They do.
The power of context in shaping behavior.
Absolutely.
And the limitations of our own perception.
So important.
But most importantly, we learned that while misjudging strangers is a common human experience.
It happens to all of us.
It's not an inevitable one.
It's not. We have a choice.
We have a choice. And by being, more mindful of our biases, more attentive to context, and more open to the unknown, we can create a world where strangers are seen not as threats, but as opportunities.
Opportunities. I love that.
For connection and understanding.
Beautiful.
And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought.
Okay.
From Gladwell himself.
Right.
He says that talking to strangers is a delicate act.
It is.
It requires us to be open to the unknown, to embrace ambiguity, and to accept that we will never fully know another person.
So true.
Wise words to carry with us as we navigate a world full of fascinating strangers.
That's for sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course, my pleasure.
And until next time.
Yeah.
Remember to keep those minds open.
Yes.
Those judgments in check and those conversations flowing.
I like it.